Breaking news on a Friday as the Philadelphia Eagles have made a trade, sending edge rusher Bryce Huff across the country to the San Francisco 49ers after signing him just last offseason to a pretty big deal, but we kind of saw the signs of this happening sometime soon. Going to dive into the full trade details and everything here on Philadelphia Eagles now, but before we get into it, guys, this is why you subscribe to the channel. Of course, I'm not Chase Sr. Chase is not here in the office today, so producer Chip stepping in, filling in. But even when Chase is not here, we always got you guys covered. Whenever the Eagles make any type of move, we always make a video to keep you informed. So if you're looking for a place for Eagles news every single day, be sure to hit that sub button. So the news broke from Adam Schefter here just a few minutes ago. The Niners and Eagles working to finalize a trade that will send edge rusher Bryce Huff to San Francisco for a mid-round pick, and it's now being reported that's probably going to be a day 3 pick. I'd imagine a 5th, maybe a 6th-round pick. Trade cannot and would not be processed until after June 1st. It's May 30th, so going to be finalized here in the coming days. Both sides are working to make it happen. Huff already has reworked his contract to help facilitate the trade in San Francisco. Huff will be reunited with 49ers defensive coordinator Robert Saleh, his former head coach with the Jets. And a little bit on that contract restructure for Bryce Huff, because the Eagles did sign him to about $17 million a year last offseason. It was a big deal. He had $17 million fully guaranteed this season. So how is that money going to work? We had talked about on the show that if they cut him or traded him, they were going to have to eat some money at some point. Schefter saying that before the trade can get finalized next week, the Eagles restructured Bryce Huff's contract this week. This is the first time we're actually hearing about this. He was set to make about $17 million, fully guaranteed, as I mentioned. But the Eagles will now take on only $9.05 million in salary, leaving the Niners responsible for the remaining $7.95 million due to Huff this season. So Eagles paying $9 million for Huff not to be on the roster. Pretty telling to me that really it's mostly Vic Fangio that is just not a big fan of Huff and his playing style. Never was really able to figure out a way to get him in that rotation. And as I mentioned, we kind of saw this coming in the past few days. If you've been watching the show, we've been covering OTAs as Eagles have been out there hitting the practice field. Bryce Huff has not been out there, and we mentioned probably a trade would be coming at some point soon. Again, because of the ways that they weren't able to get him on the field. He didn't have the production they were hoping, and then him not being there, for a player who you think about how disappointing he was last year, you'd think he'd want to be there when he can, as early as he can, as often as he can in the facilities to try to get back onto the field. Obviously, he wasn't, and now he is no longer going to be a member of the Philadelphia Eagles. A little more from Field Yates diving into exactly the cap ramifications of this move. Eagles declined Bryce Huff's $15 million fully guaranteed option bonus, which turned it into base salary, turned $9 million of that in a signing bonus, which allows San Francisco to take on the remaining money, about $7.95 as mentioned earlier. In sum, the Eagles save, $7.95 in cash and create north of $15 million in 2025 cap space. San Francisco will inherit the final 2 years of Huff's deal. Does have 2 years remaining. That's why it's so big to get off him now, owing him $7.95 in cap and cash for this season. Before we get into more on Bryce Huff and why this was such a disappointing signing from Howie Roseman and why they did end up moving on, what's your one-word reaction to the Eagles trading away Bryce Huff? My one word, I guess it's kind of two, but look, I'm just not surprised given everything we had seen from Huff the past couple seasons, but let me know your one word down in the comments section. Huff, last year, was supposed to be a premier free agent signing for Philadelphia after having a great year for the Jets in 23, was supposed to come in 2024 and be that edge rusher that could get after the quarterback, was never known as a great run defender. And look, just from the rip, didn't get a whole lot of burn in the preseason, in training camp leading up to the preseason, then actually played pretty deep into preseason games, which was pretty telling that he just wasn't able to get a full grasp of this 3-4 system that Fangio runs. And look, 20 pressures, 2.5 sacks. The PFF numbers weren't horrible, but nowhere near what he was doing in 2023. Now, what's notable is in 2023, when he was with the Jets, that was under Robert Saleh. And so with this move, him going to San Francisco, he now reunites with Robert Saleh. Now, of course, the DC back again with the Niners, where he did have his career year that got him paid by Philadelphia with a 79.7 overall PFF grade, an 86.8 pass rush grade, which was nearly top 10 in the NFL. Not a great run defender that year. He was actually much better run defending this past year for the Eagles, but 10 sacks, 67 pressures, put him top 15 in the league, despite being 56 among edge rushers in pass rush snaps. So he does have some production in there, and that's why I think it makes sense that a team like the Niners, who need pass rush help, just drafted a bunch of rookies in that end this past draft, would take a chance on somebody who, again, just a couple of seasons ago, did show a lot of promise as a young player. But look, the Eagles are going to be just fine without Bryce Huff. They were obviously just fine without him last year as they made their run to become Super Bowl champions, and they have a lot of other young guys coming up that are going to be able to replace that production, and especially with some of the signings they made in the offseason, it just makes a lot of sense that this is the route they would go in. Obviously, you got Nolan Smith, you got Jalix Hunt as your two bookend edge rushers, two young studs who, as the season progressed and the season went along, both of them really showed a lot of improvement and a lot of signs that they can be your two starting edge rushers for the foreseeable future. But of course, the Eagles bring in Josh Uche, who kind of similar to Bryce Huff, like had a breakout year a couple of years ago, has been a little bit disappointing since then. You bring in another young player over from New York in Azeez Ojulari. You draft Antoine Powell-Ryland as well. So you have some bodies here at that edge spot where trading away Bryce Huff, although theoretically he could have provided you more, just don't really need that in there, especially at his price point. And we talk about some of these guys, right? Nolan Smith in particular. First round pick, obviously, out of Georgia not too long ago, and he's really started to come along. Had 4 sacks in the playoffs just this past season, which led all players in the postseason. And you really feel good about his development with his strength, his athleticism, his burst around the edge. Did hurt that arm in the Super Bowl, but he's been out there in OTAs with a big brace on. So you imagine he'll be ready for the start of the season. You have a lot of faith in him to keep progressing to become really a star edge rusher in this league. And then Jalix Hunt, man, a former safety turned edge rusher who, when Howie Roseman took him in the draft a couple of years ago, people were, I'm not going to say completely shocked, but you just needed to see what he could actually do at that edge rusher spot as a more raw guy. But similar to Nolan Smith, as the year went on, and in the playoffs, I believe he had 2 sacks in that playoff run, had a great game in the Super Bowl as well. You really saw how the Eagles and that coaching staff gained his trust in him being able to be out there in those big moments, to the point where Bryce Huff wasn't even active for the Super Bowl. So it makes a lot of sense where you have these guys that you're very confident in. You draft a couple young guys. You pick up some guys in free agency. The Eagles are not going to miss the contributions or lack thereof from Bryce Huff. And look, for Howie Roseman, obviously we praise Howie a lot for the moves he's able to make, especially in the draft, in free agency, and putting together this truly spectacular roster. This one, obviously, a little bit of a swing and a miss. I understand taking the chance on a guy who had that great year for the Jets despite limited playing time, but was just never really a fit in the system. In New York, he was more of a put a hand in the dirt, rushing off the edge in more of a 4-3 system. With the Eagles, they asked him to do some stand-up stuff, and it just wasn't really his game. So I'll give credit to Howie. Obviously, you're going to knock him a little bit for making this signing, but look, you got to give him some credit as well for being able to move off of the deal when they did and not being afraid to admit his mistakes. Some GMs around the league would want to hold on and try to get any production they could out of Bryce Huff because this was their signing, this was their guy. I don't want to look bad by shipping him off so soon, but Howie's like, you know what? No, we made a mistake. We don't need him. He doesn't fit. Let's just get what we can, probably a 5th or a 6th round pick here, and let's move on. So credit where credit is due to Howie for that and for also replenishing this edge room so that making this mistake didn't totally hurt them this past season, and having him leave is not going to hurt them moving forward. All right, so Bryce Huff, just like that, no longer on the Philadelphia Eagles after one very disappointing season. Another reminder, subscribe to the channel anytime the Eagles make any move. We always got you covered right here on the show. So lock us in, turn on those notifications, and we'll see you next time here on Eagles Now.